What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today I am bringing you a video that I should have brought you a while ago. You see, the lovely folks over at ICV2, they bring us a list of the top collectible games twice a year. And we've not looked at their latest list, but given that it's Christmas, and one of the things we do around Christmas is, we make a couple of less time-dependent videos, so I can have a few days off over Christmas. I figured now would be a good time to talk about it, because things are getting kind of interesting. So shout out to ICV2, a great website you should all be checking out. So what do we see? Well, if we look at the top, nothing should be surprising about this. If we look at the top games in the mass channel, it's Pokemon 1, Magic 2, Yu-Gi-Oh! 3. If we look at the top games in the hobby channel, it's Magic 1, Pokemon 2, Yu-Gi-Oh! 3. And if we look at the top 5 games overall, we can see that it's Pokemon 1, Magic 2, Yu-Gi-Oh! 3. None of this should be a surprise to you. By now, you should be expecting this. The fact of the matter is, Pokemon is the #1 game. And I know a lot of people don't want to believe this. A lot of people think that Magic is #1. Magic's not #1. Pokemon's #1. Now, if you have a look there, you will notice that Pokemon is #1 in mass channel and Magic is #1 in the hobby channel. But Pokemon is #1 overall. What this basically means is that if you go into hobby stores, local game stores, call them what you will, Magic is going to be #1. But if you go into places like supermarkets and video game stores and all of that, places that also sell TCGs, bookstores, Pokemon is going to be #1. And when you add all of it together, Pokemon is the #1 collectible game in the world. Now, Pokemon and Magic tend to go a little bit back and forth here. Last time Magic was #1 was back in spring 2019, but this is now twice in a row Pokemon have taken the #1 spot. There's a decent chance Magic will take it back again. Pokemon and Magic do tend to go a little bit back and forth. But at the moment, it is a clear Pokemon 1, Magic 2, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Always sits there in third place. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just the third biggest game. There was an exception, kind of, in 2019. Keyforge took over #3 just for the hobby channel, not overall, but that's where we are. Now, if we continue looking down the list, things get a little bit interesting and a little bit sad. You see, if we look at numbers 9 and 10, we've got number 9, the Transformers TCG, and number 10, Star Wars Destiny. And there is one very sad thing that both of those games have in common. And the sad thing that both of those games have in common is they don't exist anymore. Both of those games have been discontinued, Transformers by Wizards of the Coast and Star Wars Destiny by Fantasy Flight Games. And I've made this point in many videos before, and I'm sure I'll make it in many videos in the future. I know everybody's trying to look for some conspiratorial reason as to why those games failed, but as someone who has been teaching and researching business for 15-20 years, I can tell you that it is a lot more simple than people make out. They didn't sell well enough. I know a lot of people talk about Star Wars Destiny and they go, it's the dice, it's the dice. The dice were too awkward to make, which would have been a great theory if Star Wars Destiny had failed on set 1 or 2. I think it failed on set 9. For a couple of years, the dice production wasn't an issue, but it was when sales dropped too low. Transformers TCG, they literally came out and said, it just didn't sell well enough. It didn't get enough Transformers fans into it. We're sorry. Although they shouldn't apologise. They made a great game for several years. Both Star Wars Destiny and Transformers were great games. I'm a huge fan of. I love them both. They were awesome. Transformers is one of the games that really sparked the growth of Wassy Plays a couple of years ago. I adored that game. Still do. But it didn't sell well enough. And I hear all these people saying things like, well, if they'd have spent more money advertising Transformers, or they just say if they'd advertised it more. But think about it in business terms, there is a certain amount of money that Transformers needs to make in order to essentially be a viable concern moving forward. And if you start spending a lot of money on advertising, the amount of money that you need to make to continue selling the Transformers TCG increases. And they are people, and I know people think different things about Wizards of the Coast, that's fine. The one thing we can all agree on is they've been making TCGs for like 20 years plus. And they've got predictive models which are probably fairly accurate. And they looked at these and went, we can spend the money on advertising, but it's not going to hit that. It's not going to hit the number we need. They failed because they didn't sell well enough. It is as simple as that. Now, sticking to other games that we really talk about lots on this channel, or at least we have talked about, games which I have a fondness for, there is both good and bad news looking at this list. If we look at the good news, Final Fantasy is on the list. It's up there at number 7. Why is that relevant? Final Fantasy has never been on the list. I've got the list open here from fall 2016. Final Fantasy TCG launched on the 28th of October 2016. That is when Opus 1 was released. And it wasn't on the list in fall 2016. It wasn't there in spring 2017. It wasn't there in fall 2017 or spring 2018 or fall 2018 or spring 2019 or fall 2019. This is the first time Final Fantasy has ever made it onto this top 10 list. That is huge. It's coming in at number 7. Now, to be fair, it's jumped up Transformers and Destiny, both of which are discontinued, but it's there above Weiss Schwarz, which is always there around about the bottom of the list generally. It's one spot below Dragon Ball Super, which has proven to be a pretty consistently successful game. Again, you can say what you like about Dragon Ball. I hear a lot of love, I hear a lot of criticism. The fact of the matter is, Dragon Ball Super has been sitting around the kind of 5 to 8 since it was released. It was number 9 in fall 2017, but still, it's there in the bottom half of the list pretty much the whole time. Dragon Ball Super does well, and Final Fantasy is one spot below. This is awesome, awesome news. Now, one thing we need to remember, and I probably should have mentioned it earlier in the video, but let me mention it now. We're in 2020, and 2020 sucks. This is essentially sales in the first half of 2020, bearing in mind March is when, or kind of end of March, is when we really kicked off in terms of lockdown and all of that, and shops closing. We've not had a usual year. Maybe that's the reason. Maybe Final Fantasy has thrived because of what they've been able to do. Maybe they've been better at negotiating the pandemic than other card companies have, because this is the only Square Enix game on the list. I'm not entirely sure, but I can tell you that Final Fantasy has jumped on the list, and that is awesome. And Final Fantasy, they've been going since late 2016. They have just completed 4 full years. Maybe they're starting to come into their own as a TCG to watch, which would be awesome because that game is awesome. But that brings us to the sad news. Keyforge isn't on the list. Now, I don't want to be a doom-monger or any of that silliness. We're in 2020. 2020 is a weird year. Hold your horses. But I am a ridiculous fan of Keyforge. I have called Keyforge the most mechanically sound card game out there, and I stick by that. There are other card games I prefer. Pokemon and Digimon both jump above for various reasons. But if you want a mechanically sound card game, i.e. one where all the mechanics fit together beautifully, I don't think you can beat Keyforge. If you want a game which is just over-the-top phenomenal sealed, you can't beat Keyforge. It's not on the list. Now, this is really interesting to me because Keyforge really came out the gate strong. In fall 2018, it was the number 3 game in the hobby channel, number 4 overall. It was looking like it was going to challenge Pokemon, Magic, and Yu-Gi-Oh! In the top 3. If we look at spring 2019, again, it is a top 3 game, so it actually jumped Yu-Gi-Oh! In the hobby channel. Still number 4 overall, but still number 3 game in the hobby channel, actually jumping Yu-Gi-Oh! Nobody's done that. Like, if you look all the way back to fall 2016, the top 3 in the hobby channel have been Pokemon, Magic. It's actually been Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! Every single time, because Magic does outsell Pokemon in the hobby channel. But if we go into spring 2019, Keyforge actually jumps in at number 3. But if we go to fall 2019, it's not in the top 5 overall, and it's dropped to number 7 in the hobby channel. And if we go to spring 2020, it's off the list altogether. Does this mean that Keyforge is destined for failure? No. No, it doesn't. But in the same way I just told you how well Final Fantasy must be navigating the pandemic, we've got to say the opposite about Keyforge. We've got to say that for whatever reason, Keyforge has not been navigating the pandemic. Now, this might be a deliberate decision. Final Fantasy might be... you've noticed there have not been any Keyforge videos here for a while. This isn't me being a horrible person. There just hasn't been Keyforge news out there. We've not been getting card reveals and news and any of that. Things have been very quiet on the Keyforge front. And it might be the Fantasy Flight Games are deliberately just taking it chill, waiting for the comeback in the new year. But the fact of the matter is, 2 games that have since been discontinued are on the list, and Keyforge isn't. Final Fantasy has jumped in, essentially, instead of Keyforge. Keyforge has jumped out, and Final Fantasy has jumped in. That does not spell the end for Keyforge as a card game, and don't be too hasty to go there, but it's definitely not a good sign. Elsewhere on the list, we've got stuff like Dragon Ball Super, Vanguard, and Vice Schwartz, all just hanging around on the list like they tend to. It's interesting that Vanguard has popped up to number 5, but honestly, Vanguard has been popping around the second half of the list for a little while at this stage, so yeah, Vanguard's slightly higher than normal, but Vanguard does tend to be a little bit above or below Dragon Ball Super. It tends to be there or thereabout, so yeah. It jumped Dragon Ball in the full 2019 list after being generally below it. So, I suppose it's staying above. So that's all we can say. That's my analysis of the top 10 card games. Some good news, some bad news, some genuinely sad news, and a bunch of stuff that is probably going to change. I do need to mention one more time before we finish the video. Please, please, please do bear in mind that things change. And we are in 2020, and 2020 is a weird old year. So try not to draw too much into this in terms of negativity. If you're a Pokemon fan that wants to be happy it's selling gangbusters, by all means do. If you are a Keyforge fan that's a little bit worried, hold your horses. 2020 is a weird year. But I want to hear from you guys, ladies and gentlemen. I want to hear your opinion. I want to hear which of these games you play and which of these you're into. So go nuts in the comment section, but be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassy, where we talk about all kinds of card games, Pokemon, Digimon, Yu-Gi-Oh, etc. Remember, Digimon had not launched in the first half of this year, so it's going to be interesting to see where Digimon falls. But remember, Digimon doesn't officially launch till January, so even the next time this list comes out for fall 2020, don't expect Digimon to be on the list. It is going to be the spring 2021 list that really tells us how well Digimon is doing. And do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCGradio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all kinds of fun things. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wassy Plays.